Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into the Quranic narrative of Adam, but we're not just skimming the surface-level story that most people already know. We're going to dig a lot deeper, focusing on the profound theological insights and the really fascinating centuries-old scholarly debates found right within the classical Islamic source texts.
So, here is our roadmap for This Explainer. We'll be looking at the beginning of creation and the teaching of the names, the prostration of the angels and Iblis' stance, paradise and the tree of sin, and finally, the core lessons we can take away from the story. Part 1. The beginning of creation and teaching the names.
Our story kicks off in the heavenly realm. God announces the creation of a Khalifa, a vicegerent who's going to be placed on earth, formed from incredibly humble basic elements like clay and mud. But, and this is crucial, God doesn't just physically shape Adam, he elevates him intellectually. We get this powerful announcement in the Quran, and he taught Adam the names, all of them. Now, this short little phrase, it's the exact spark that set off a massive scholarly debate in classical texts. What exactly were these names?
Well, classical scholars approach this mystery from a few different angles. If we look at Tafsir al-Qurtubi, you see a whole spectrum of opinions. The famous scholar al-Tabari, he favored the idea that Adam was taught the specific names of the angels. Another scholar, Ibn Zayd, thought it meant the names of all of his future offspring. But there's another, much more comprehensive view that really puts human potential front and center.
And that brings us to heavyweight scholars like Ibn Abbas and al-Qurtubi. They argued that Adam was literally taught the names of absolutely everything in existence. Ibn Abbas was so specific about this, he said it even included everyday, mundane items, right down to a bowl and a whip. The big takeaway here is that language and intellect are seen as a direct, divine gift given to humanity's first father. It's what gives us human beings this undeniable intellectual edge over the rest of creation.
Moving on to part 2, the prostration of angels and Iblis' stance. So Adam has been given this incredible intellect, and now comes a massive test for the rest of creation. God commands the angels to bow down, to prostrate in respect to this brand new human. The angels? They obey immediately. But one figure flat out refuses, Iblis, who we also know as Satan. And to understand why, you have to look at the sharp contrast in their origins. Adam was created from clay, right? It's low to the ground, it's stable, and it represents humility. But Iblis, he was created from fire. Fire flares upward, it's volatile, and in this context, it represents pure arrogance. This physical material contrast is literally the root of the core tension in these texts. In fact, Iblis actually uses this material difference as his ultimate defense. He says, I am better than him. You created me from fire and created him from clay. This right here showcases the terrifying origin of his arrogance. He actually believed his genetic makeup made him superior to God's own command. And as you might expect, that exact attitude gets him immediately expelled from the divine presence. But here's the thing. Iblis doesn't just accept his banishment and quietly walk away. No, he makes this relentless vow of eternal enmity against humans. He swears to sit on the straight path, constantly ambushing and misleading humanity, all just to prove to God that we humans aren't worth the honor we were given. This single, terrifying vow establishes the conflict that drives the entire human experience forward. All right, on to part 3, paradise and the tree of sin. So, Adam and his newly created wife are now dwelling peacefully in paradise. But before we get into the whole situation with the forbidden tree, let's address a really fascinating question. It's one that sparked a major theological debate. Which paradise did Adam actually live in? Was it the eternal heaven we think of in the afterlife, or was it, just a really beautiful garden somewhere else on earth? When we look at the classical texts, there is a serious geographical and theological divide. The mainstream Ahl-Sunnah view, which is championed by scholars like Ibn Taymiyyah, strongly maintains that this was Jannat al-Khuld, the eternal paradise up in the heavens. On the flip side, the Mu'tazila and certain philosophers argued it was merely an earthly garden. Some of them even claimed it was located in India or Jeddah, which is wild to think about. So how do mainstream scholars prove they were actually in the heavenly paradise? They do it through linguistics. The key Arabic word used in the Quran here is hubut, which means descent. The text repeatedly commands Adam and Eve to descend after their sin. Scholars argue that descent strictly means moving from a physically higher place to a lower place. If they were already hanging out in a garden on Earth, the text would have just told them to travel or migrate. The language itself proves they were in a higher heavenly dimension.
Now, let's tackle another super common question that people get totally stuck on. What kind of tree did Adam actually eat from? And a quick side note, it's really important to remember that the divine command wasn't just don't eat from it. It was a strict warning not to even approach the tree. It shows us that just getting dangerously close to a sin is exactly how the trap begins.
You've probably heard endless myths about this. Was it an apple tree? A stalk of wheat? A fig tree? Well, this brilliantly illustrates the classical Islamic approach to storytelling. The great scholar Al-Tabari boldly concludes that debating the exact species of the tree is completely useless. God intentionally left it vague. Why? Because knowing if it was an apple or a fig provides absolutely zero benefit to our lives. Tabari is essentially warning us against wasting our time on unverified myths and missing the actual moral of the whole story.
Which brings us to our final section, Part 4, Lessons Learned from the Story. This ancient origin narrative is actually a perfect mirror for the human condition today. It maps out the Islamic concept of human error and redemption so clearly. Step 1, the Quran makes it incredibly clear that Adam's error was born out of human weakness and forgetfulness, not the arrogant defiance that Shaytan showed. Step 2 is the sin itself. But step 3, this is the real differentiator: immediate repentance. Adam doesn't sit around making excuses, he takes immediate responsibility. And this directly unlocks step 4, divine forgiveness. It shows us that humans will inevitably fall, but the path back is always through immediate, humble repentance. To summarize our sources, we really have 3 core takeaways here. First, humanity's unified origin. We all come from this exact same beginning, which completely erases any room for worldly arrogance. Second, it highlights the extreme danger of taking our blessings for granted. Think about it. Adam was in paradise itself and lost it by crossing one single boundary. And third, we are constantly reminded of Satan's continuous, ongoing enmity. His vow to mislead us, it never expired. It's active right now.
But don't worry, you shouldn't leave this explainer feeling helpless against that enemy. The text offers some serious divine protection. The Quran reassures us that while Satan can whisper and tempt, God declares he has absolutely no ultimate authority or physical power over true believers. The devil can invite you, sure, but only you can choose to walk through the door.
And that wraps up our explainer. The story of Adam isn't just some dusty, ancient history lesson. It's literally the blueprint of our daily human struggle. The temptation is real, the enemy's active, but God's mercy is always wider than our mistakes. So I want to leave you with a final thought to reflect on today. Knowing exactly how this cosmic story started, how are you actively guarding against this ancient, continuous threat in your own life right now? Thanks so much for joining me, and keep learning.